I'm admitting.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to start at 10:05 today as we're giving people time to log in. So just be patient with us, please. Thank you.
Vanessa Devin does not have the option to turn his camera on. And Andrew said you canceled the invite, so I don't know if he can get in. I'll make Devin a presenter. I made Devin a presenter, so he should be able to.
He's here. I can see him now.
Okay, good.
Mhm.
Let's see, I'll do the same for Derek.
Hello, everyone. I am free. I can talk now.
Yeah. We're figuring it out as we go along. There
Hey,
you are.
that's
And
okay.
I sent Andrew the invite. Okay. It's true.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. We're going to go ahead and get started, and people will filter in, and Michelle will help us allow people into the room. And we're going to start items off with our agenda. Welcome to the pre-proposal conference for the Consolidated Community Funding Pool, RFP 20000003832, otherwise known as RFP 2, Emergency Food and Housing. This is our agenda for today. We're going to start off with a few items of welcoming staff and introductions with Sarah Allen from NCS. We will then do a CCFP RFP 1 and RFP 2 overview and process improvement. Then we'll review the funding categories with Ramona Carroll from NCS, and then RFP 2 notable enhancements with both Sarah and Ramona. After that, we'll review procurement requirements from myself, the DPMM staff, RFP forms with Michelle Brizzi, and the budget forms and attachments. And then we'll end the conference with answers and questions. Please feel free to enter your questions in the chat box throughout the presentation, and they will all be reviewed at the end of this conference. Okay, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah. Sarah Allen.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Sarah Allen, one of the Deputy Directors with Neighborhood and Community Services. Welcome to our pre-proposal conference. It's great to see so many people that I recognize your names, and glad that you're here and are interested in participating in and applying for this year's funding pool. Just to level set for everyone, in case you are new to this process, as you know, the Consolidated Community Funding Pool is our competitive funding process for human services programs that are developed and administered by nonprofits and community-based organizations. As you know, this funding allocated to organizations through CCFP serves as our health and human services investment and catalyst, for strengthening the human services network of programs and available resources to community residents. And so our health and human services cannot operate without all of you and these resources that you all provide to the community every day. The management and strategic direction for the funding pool is done through a partnership with the Department of Procurement and Material Management, DPMM, who you all know very well, Neighborhood and Community Services, NCS, and the Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD, as well as the Consolidated Community Funding Pool Advisory Committee, or CCFAC. That committee is a citizen group established by the Board of Supervisors and charged with the responsibility to advise the Board of Supervisors on the development and implementation of both the federally required consolidated plan as well as the recommended CCFP priorities. And so you're going to be hearing a little bit more about the CCFP priorities, and I know you've seen them in the RFP, but we're going to walk through them to give you a little bit more information in depth on those. And also CCFAC also helps with the staff and support of assessments and seeing what the community development and health and human services staff needs are within the county. Now we'd like to introduce the staff that are directly supporting this project. So if you are a staff member that is supporting this project directly, could you please raise your virtual hand so I can call on you to be able to introduce yourself? Please give your organization and your name, and those participating, please bear with us. We have a number of staff on here, but we thought it was important for you to put faces with names as well as what organization they're with, or what agency, they're with. So with that, I'm going to start with Marla.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marla Zametsky, and I'm the Cross-System Prevention Manager with Neighborhood and Community Services.
Thank you. Michelle Brizzi.
Good morning, everyone. I am Michelle Brizzi. I am a contract supervisor and administrator for the Consolidated Community Funding Pool. I work with the Department of Procurement and Material Management.
Thank you. Andrew Janos.
Good morning, Andrew Janos with the Department of Procurement, Material Management, one of our deputy directors.
Thank you. Ramona Carroll.
Good morning. My name is Ramona Carroll, and I work for the Department of Neighborhood and Community Services, and I'm the equity manager for the agency.
Great. Devin Thornton.
Good morning. I'm Devin Thornton. I work with the Department of Procurement and Material Management. I'm a contract specialist.
Great. Derek Solomon.
Good morning. My name is Derek Solomon. I'm a contract specialist on Team 2 in the Department of Procurement and Material Management.
Thank you. Vanessa Calderon.
Good morning. I'm Vanessa Calderon. I'm a contract analyst for the Department of Procurement and Material Management.
Great. And Jonathan Melendez.
Good morning. With the Neighborhood and Community Services, I work across system prevention.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. We wanted to make sure that you had faces with names, and also this is the team that will be facilitating this year's Consolidated Community Funding Pool. Everything from the launching of this, the SAC process, the technical advisory process, as well as negotiation, et cetera. So this is the team that we will be working with to be able to support this cycle's CCFP RFP2 process. And just a reminder, we are in the RFP2 pre-proposal conference, and so a lot of our conversations today are going to be an overview and a discussion of highlights from some changes. In case you have been a participant or an awardee last cycle, we've made some changes that we wanted to highlight, but also for those of you that might be new to this process, we're just going to be highlighting a couple areas of the contract, the RFP. This does not take the place of you reading it very closely and answering the questions directly. We just wanted to give some expanded information. Next slide, please, Ramona. Okay.
Sorry. All right. Oh, goodness. A new system, everyone. Please be patient.
Back one.
There we go.
Okay. All right. Ramona and I are going to be tag teaming this. Wanted to just remind those of you that have participated, or for those of you that are new, we have a significant difference in the funding pool that took place started to take place, I should say, back in 2020, where the Board of Supervisors directed staff to review the funding pool and make recommendations for process improvements. Those process improvements were implemented last cycle, and so this is our second cycle, that we are going to be producing a CCFP process that has 2 RFPs. And the reason why we did that, or the board asked us to review it, make recommendations, and then they approve them, was to ensure that we are supporting the needs of residents in multiple areas, particularly those urgent needs. So the process improvement changes were improved and, like I said, implemented last cycle. And they used the 2-lane strategy of 2 RFPs. And similar to last cycle, we have RFP1, which has a pre-proposal conference for this afternoon, which focuses on the traditional CCFP programs and has categories associated to that. So, for example, self-sufficiency, recreation, legal services, et cetera. That funding bucket. So we have the entire funding amount in CCFP for the CCFP process, which is approximately $13.8 million thereabouts, and $8.8 million is going to that section of the program, so RFP1. And then where we are today in this pre-proposal conference is RFP2, which focuses on the emergency needs of the community in food and housing assistance. And that's approximately $5 million, $4 million going to housing, and $1 million going for food. Emergency housing and emergency food. And that's allocated proportionally based on need in the community. And we have some enhancements in that area as well. As you may know, that this process is supported by a 2 resident-led selection advisory committee. So the individuals that are reviewing your proposals are community members that constitute the selection advisory committee, and they rate the proposals for each of the different RFPs, and they recommend funding. They also are supported through a technical advisory committee. So those are county staff supporting that are subject matter experts on these kinds of areas. We've also incorporated your feedback for those of you that were awardees previously. And this feedback and process improvements have been included in RFP1 and RFP2 that you'll be learning about in a moment. and that we're continuously and constantly reviewing the current CCFP funded programs to ensure that critical components of health and human services are maintained. And so we're constantly looking at the process that we're doing, those that are awarded, those things that we are awarded, to make sure that all of the ability of these proposals and these programs are supporting the critical needs of health and human services. Next slide. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to Ramona, and she's going to talk through the category development process and the CCFP categories for RFP2.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. And as Sarah mentioned, we have had some enhancements, and so I'm just going to read over our overarching statement on the categories. And this you'll see in both RFP1 and RFP2. So these categories were identified and are aligned with the Health and Human Services determinants. Each outcome statement focuses on a broad community definition and specifically includes all individuals, communities, and families, income levels, abilities, and ages. Whereas appropriate, providing legal services, case management, transportation, high quality and affordable childcare, linguistically, including interpretation and translation, culturally and developmentally appropriate services and or other resources that remove barriers and allow participation may be included in all 7 categories of RFP1, and case management may be included within the 2 categories of, within the 2 categories of RFP2, which we are. So I will go into those categories next. Okay, so for RFP2, the categories are emergency food assistance and emergency housing assistance. And I want to just share what they are and just highlight a few of the service examples. So emergency food is urgent food supports, an allotment of food and as needed associated case management services. These food supports can be short or long-term in nature to meet a critical or urgent need. Programs must provide direct client food assistance and should include food which reflects the cultural and religious and situational needs of the recipients. So when you're thinking about emergency food, please think about like your distribution sites, your programs, programs that increase access to grocery stores, farmers markets, creation of emergency pop-up markets, and also food banks. And we understand that many of you do programs in different ways, so that could include such things as using gift cards, if that's part of your emergency food support distribution in your program. So that is also allowed. For emergency housing, it is really focusing on housing support services to resolve instability, prevent eviction or displacement. Services are short-term and are not long-term housing programs. So you're thinking about short-term rental assistance, utility payments, provision of temporary or emergency shelter, and supportive services to individuals and families, including youth experiencing homelessness, and programs and case management services that address eviction and prevention or housing crisis. Hey, Sarah.
Great. Okay, so we wanted to highlight some notable enhancements that we've made since our last cycle, and there are 4 of them. We want to talk a little bit about the demonstration of need and the program design, the outcome measures, the RFP2 outcome measures, definition and service timeframes for emergency food, and then the approach and equitable practices. Next slide.
Sorry.
Okay.
This thing is extremely sensitive.
Okay, so thank you. The first section I'd like to call out, and you all will be able to have this PowerPoint. At the top of the page for each of the notable enhancements, we put the page number and the best that we could, the area in which you will find this. So in what I've captured above in italics is the on page 3 of Form 2, it talks about the area in which you would serve and the area in which both the region that you serve as well as the zip code that you serve. So, or serve multiple ones, I understand. What we've done this cycle is to not only proportionately distribute where the funding should go, but we've also given you the dollar figure in which you can use as a basis for developing your budget. So in years past, you all identified need, you described the zip codes in which you were working in, but you also gave a figure in which you were estimating would be the best budget for your program. We recognize that you are absolutely the experts of your program and the needs in the community, but we also recognize that because we have a finite amount of funding, and we have funding that, again, $4 million for emergency housing and $1 million for food, we also thought that we should be able to put some parameters on that so that you can understand how we're trying to ensure that the funding is targeted towards those areas most in need, but also that you'd be able to use these to, again, create your own budgets. So that's a very important piece. We're going to get into that in the next slide, but I also want to highlight this last sentence here in this area of the RFP, which is that if additional funding is available, as well as the funding, let me stop there. If additional funding is available, so beyond the $5 million that is in RFP 2, if the board so decides to allocate through the budget process, that we will be receiving more money in this area. That is not a definite, that is not, but in a possibility, we wanted to make sure that you all know, we're aware that please build your budget according to what we've put here in the allocated zip codes amounts, but we may or could in the future get additional funding. And if additional funding is available, we will be discussing that with you at the time of the negotiations if you are successful. And when we will be discussing that with you, we'll be also discussing the amount of funding that your organization could potentially be available to receive, as well as discuss the funding disbursement model. So many of you have worked with us during the pandemic, and we had a slightly different process with those funding. With that funding, the federal funding that we had, we'd like you to build your model according to what your programming is. So for example, if for emergency housing, if you give out $500 a month and you're able to support residents a couple times a year, for example, we would like to have discussions with you at the time of negotiation, if there's additional funding, to be able to work through what the best model may be to be able to ensure that that funding gets to the residents that are in need. So we don't want it to change your model. We're just saying that if there is additional funding, and even with the funding that we are giving out at contract negotiation, we would like to talk to you a little bit more about our processes and what you've suggested as a model, particularly for rental assistance. So again, we've tried to capture that below, which is build your proposal accordingly. Next slide, and we may have a lot of questions in this area. We understand that, but we wanted to make sure we gave you that information. Next slide, Ramona.
Sarah, I'm sorry, Sarah, I didn't mean to interrupt your presentation, okay, but we seem to be having an issue with quite a few nonprofits that are in the waiting room. Oh. Apparently they received a link by email instead of using the link in the proposal that is in Bonfire. And this is where the confusion is. They are not able to access the meeting using that link. So I have been trying to field questions. You're telling them to go to Bonfire to use the link in the proposal. So if anyone is on this call that knows someone that's waiting in the waiting room, please tell your staff to use the link that's in the proposal in Bonfire. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah.
Sure. And as a reminder, we are recording this. And so we will also send this out or make it available, I should say, correct? So apologize for any confusion, folks. In addition to the information that I just shared about having some additional conversations at the point of contract negotiation, this is what I was referring to that is in the proposal, again, Form 2, page 3, where we have now allocated, according to zip code, the funding amounts that are available for this section. We only have the emergency food assistance chart here, but as you'll see as you know, in the RFP2 proposal, it is, RFP2 documents, it is both emergency food allocation per zip code for dollar amounts, as well as emergency housing assistance. Next slide. Okay, and then this is also an enhancement that we've made, absolutely taking your feedback into consideration, and wanted to just walk through this with you as closely as possible so that when you're doing these sections, you have the right information. And for RFP2, which is, we have requested that you are complying with, or you are utilizing the outcome measures that we are asking as standardized. So what that means is that in RFP1, for example, you're able to choose your outcome measures and create your own. For this one, because it's very specific on the services we're asking you to provide, each proposal needs to create recommendations for I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted a little bit. For each program that you are describing and asking for funding for, standardized outcomes are necessary. And so the first two, where it says required standardized outcomes, overall stability and basic needs, all programs, everyone, whether you're doing food or housing, need to do these first two. Children and adults have access to community safety net resources that promote stability, and persons have improved access to emergency basic needs assistance. Everyone is doing those two. Everyone. Okay, so you need to ensure that those are the outcome areas in which you're providing information for. Okay, now if you are doing emergency housing, you do the next two. If you're doing emergency food assistance, you do the bottom two. So every proposal needs to have 4 of these standardized outcome measures. We apologize, last cycle it was a little confusing. We're trying to make it more streamlined and concise. So everyone should have 4 outcome measures. And again, that is number 7. And I believe that description is pretty succinct, but we wanted to make sure we highlighted it and raised it up for you to do. And so, Ramona, I'm going to turn it, I believe, over to you, or do I have the next one? I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry, having a little, okay. Am I skipping? Okay, it's me. All right, sorry about that, everyone. All right, so as Sarah mentioned earlier, that we incorporated feedback from you all if you participated in the cycle before regarding our process improvement. So based on the feedback from last cycle's awardees, we've changed the timeline and removed the 6-month time frame. However, these funds are targeted for urgent food needs. So we just have here, just for clarification, to help with any confusion around RFP1, food and nutrition, and then RFP2, emergency food assistance. So RFP1, food and nutrition, we're looking at nutrition education programs, farmers markets, co-ops, providing food provisions that offer case management services towards self-sufficiency, and supplemental food programs such as backpacks, right? And then again, for RFP2, these are urgent food supports. We're looking at neighborhood distribution sites. And while you may do your programming for, I'm just trying to think, if you're doing something like a farmer's market, or you're going out into the community to provide nutritional classes, think about why you're doing it. So that would be a RFP1 compared to meeting an urgent need. So I think as you all are thinking about your programming, your individual programming, you're thinking about which box does your food program fit into? Is this something that's more to provide long-term support, that you're educating community, you're doing things to have access to information and education about healthy and nutritious foods, and the opportunities to develop the knowledge and resources to practice healthy eating, or are you meeting an urgent and or a critical need? So think through that as you're thinking about your programming. And so hopefully seeing these two together helps you with making that decision and when you're applying for either RFP 1, 2, or both. And then just one more thing we wanted to make sure that you were aware of. So the approach and equitable practices, and this is in the technical narrative, and this is part C, page 1. Last cycle, those of you who participated know that we added an equity component to the RFP. And so what we did this cycle was to combine approach and equity. So now we have approach and equitable practices. And this is the programmatic approach and equitable practices, and it's been combined in this cycle. And what we will continue to provide you all with is the video so that you all have shared understanding and language around what we mean by equity and how we're using it in the Fairfax model. So you will have the 32-minute video to watch again, as well as the One Fairfax policy for your review. So those links are in your RFP so that you're able to access that. And then we really want to make sure that their approach and the programs and organizational equitable practices and policies are described clearly. So please review the support materials that we have given you and use those as your guides as you're thinking about the work going forward. And I believe that is it for our portion of the presentation.
Yeah, so that concludes. We'll answer questions as directed after DPMM does their section, but wanted to make sure we provided that information with you for you as our DPMM colleagues will go through other technical aspects of this.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Ramona. We are now going to review the RFP that was available on Bonfire, and we're going to highlight some areas that we want to focus on. As Sarah has mentioned, it is the responsibility of applicants to read the solicitation entirely, as well as the resource manual. So to start, submitting proposals via Bonfire portal is mandatory. Fairfax County will not accept proposals submitted by paper, telephone, fax, or email in response to this RFP. Moving down to section 1, our introduction. The purpose of this request for proposal is to solicit applications from eligible nonprofits to provide emergency housing and emergency food assistance to residents within 1 or more zip codes and regions to the county. The total available funding is projected to be $5 million, as Sarah went over. All awards are subject to the Fairfax County general conditions and instructions to bidders and the special provisions found in the resource manual. Section 2, eligible applicants, organizations with a nonprofit 501c3 tax-exempt status, or organizations that have established their 501c3 tax-exempt status by February 20, 2024, including faith-based and religious organizations, may apply. Applicants may be located in other jurisdictions, however, the program proposed must serve only eligible Fairfax County residents. Section 3 here, pre-proposal conference. That's the meeting we're at today. The purpose of this conference is to give potential applicants an opportunity to ask questions and obtain clarification regarding any aspect of this RFP. There will be a recorded copy of this conference available within 10 business days, which is currently October 13th of this year, which can be found at the link provided here on 3.3. Section 4, questions and addenda. This information is new and an addenda is being released with the updated email. All questions should be directed to myself at the email seen on the screen here. The final date to submit questions is November 8th, 2023 at 2 p.m. All addenda shall be signed and submitted with your proposal. Section 5, background information. This is great information about how the CCFP came to be and how we have 2 RFPs. The area we want to focus on is 5.7 because we do get this question a lot. And if you go to our contract registry using the link provided here, you're able to view funded programs from the FY23-24 cycle. Just enter CCFP into the description of the contract service or commodity field to find those. Section 6, proposal guideline. This section was updated recently and will be updated in an addendum. All proposed programs should address no more than one of the funding categories listed below. These are the CCFP categories. There's the overreach and statement, which we'll go over, or which Ramona just went over. Section 6.1 is about emergency food. And then 6.2 is about emergency housing. These are the two different categories, and these are some service examples provided. Section 7, standardized outcomes. Each program must select the overall stability basic need programs. These are these two outcome statements with their accompanying outcome indicators. Then depending if your proposal is for emergency housing, then you would choose these two along with their outcome indicators, or if you're providing emergency food assistance, then you would select the bottom two along with their outcome indicators. Each program should have a total of 4 outcomes per program. Section 8, the basis of award. This is a competitive negotiation. A selection advisory committee comprised entirely of Fairfax County residents is appointed by the Deputy County Executive for Health and Human Services to recommend proposals for award. We'd like to mention that these residents may or may not be familiar with your company, organization. However, it's best practice to write these proposals as if they've never heard of your program before. Applicants will be notified of recommendations and action by the Board of Supervisors in the spring of 2024. This chart is the evaluation criteria. Starting with the technical proposal, there are 4 criterions here, starting with the understanding of need at 13 points, outcomes at 23 points, equitable approach at 24 points, organizational capacity at 20 points, and then there's a cost proposal with budget and budget justifications at 20 points for a grand total of 100 points. Section 10, how to apply. All proposals must be received electronically through our portal, which is Bonfire, on or before the submission deadline. We do provide some support links here on 10.2 and 10.3. There are no limits to the number of programs an organization can submit. Each proposal must be submitted separately with all requested forms and attachments. The proposal narrative exclusive of requested forms and attachments should not exceed 17 single-sided pages. And proposals must be received no later than 2 p.m. on December 5th, 2023 via Bonfire. Section 11, the proposal instructions checklist. This checklist is there to help applicants make sure they're submitting all the documents that are required via Bonfire. If you're applying to both emergency food and emergency housing, then an applicant must submit a separate technical proposal and cost proposal for each service containing the requested information. Some areas we wanted to highlight is Form 1. We will review all the forms in a little later. In Form 1, we do ask that all applicants, who's ever signing the proposal cover sheet, is an authorized representative, and that the name that is listed as the contact person is either your executive director or chief executive officer for the organization. For cost proposals, something we want to note, there is a narrative and 4 forms attached to it. All funding requests must be rounded up to the nearest whole dollar. 11.3 lists out all the attachments, including the Board of Director roster, financial statements, audited and unaudited. Applicants who do not have an audit at the time of submission must provide a written justification for lack thereof, and if funded, the organization will be required to submit an audit following the first year of operation. We also do ask you to include some of these attachments. Please note some of them are applicable, and we will review this a little further. And Section 12 does talk about trade secrets and proprietary information. Fairfax County is bound by the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. So if your organization does have items that are considered trade secrets or proprietary information, we do provide an attachment 7, which is the request for protection of trade secrets and proprietary information that can be completed. Just please do note the classification of an entire proposal document, line items, and or total proposal prices cannot be counted as proprietary or trade secrets and may result in the rejection of the proposal. Okay, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle Breezy as we're going to review the forms.
Thank you, Vanessa. And if you can be so kind to watch the waiting room, we still have programs that are still trying to get in. Thank you. So good morning, everyone. Once again, I'm going to walk through the required forms that you will be submitting in response to the proposal. The first form, Form 1, this is a DPMM proposal cover sheet. What I want to point out here on this form is first is the date and time of closing for this RFP. It's December 5th, 2023 at 2 p.m. and this is a Tuesday. The contract specialist here is Vanessa Calderon, who just made her presentation. You will email Vanessa with any questions regarding RFP 2 at dpmmccfp@fairfaxcounty.gov. Scrolling down the cover sheet. Sorry, let's go back up. Forgive me. The sections that I want to point out on the cover sheet, address and name, that's all self-explanatory. But I just want to draw your attention to the contact person. As Vanessa mentioned in the checklist, we would like the contact person to be the executive director or the chief executive officer for the program or organization. And the reason for that is we've had experience in the past where you may have listed someone other than that individual as your contact person. And when it's time for notifying the program of an award, the letter goes to the point of contact that was listed on the proposal cover sheet, who may or may not have been your CEO or executive director. That person may not be working for the program and did receive the offer letter, and then the executive director is not aware of it. So to prevent that, we are insisting that you please place your executive director, CEO, or even board chair as your point of contact. And also, we request that you have the person who is legally authorized to sign for the organization affix their signature to the DPMM proposal cover sheet. The Form 2. What is important here, you're going to put in your organization title and name, but you're going to identify whether your program is 501c certified, and if not, please tell us the date when you have submitted your application for 501c3 status, because you must have 501c certification to be awarded a contract. The 2 funding categories are listed here. Sarah has already gone through them in detail. You're going to identify which one you're submitting your response under. And if it's both, each of you will be submitting 2 Form 2s, one for emergency food and one for emergency housing. In number 5, we're asking that you provide us with a brief program abstract, basically telling us the type of services you'll be providing and the outcomes you hope to achieve. We don't need a full story. All we're asking for is just a brief summary, maybe about 5 or 6 sentences. Number 6, we would like you to tell us if you serve clients that meet the community services block grant income level. We want you to tell us that percentage of clients that you serve. Now, you can use the page 46 of the resource manual, which will list the income levels for CSBG as your guide. Once you have indicated that information here, you're going to move to A. You're going to tell us if you're willing to accept CSBG funding, because CSBG funding are federal funds and it comes with other requirements. So if you please read A carefully, do not check this box unless you have read it and fully understand what we're asking, because you will be required to provide additional documentation if you receive federal funds. B, so if you check this box, said, yes, I will accept federal funds, then you will be required to complete Attachment 8 subrecipient risk analysis. And Attachment 8 is only for programs that will accept CSBG funding. If you're not accepting CSBG funding, you do not have to submit Attachment 8. Number 7, we're asking you to check off whether you're a new program, meaning that you have never received any funding from the Consolidated Community Funding Pool, or whether you're currently funded by the Consolidated Community Funding Pool. Human Services regions, you're going to check off what region and zip code you're willing to serve, both under emergency food and emergency assistance. So if you're going to serve the entire region 1, you would check off all the zip codes in region 1, and so for region 2, 3, and 4. Or you may only be serving a particular zip code in each region. So you just need to check off the little boxes to say what zip code you will be providing services to clients. So you'll be
Michelle,
doing that. Go ahead, Sarah, please.
I'm sorry. Please finish your sentence. I apologize.
No. Clarify if I've said misspoke or I left something out.
No, I was going to add that I didn't say in the last section when we talked about this, that there may be more than one provider in that zip code, and we may allocate funding again to more than one person. So when you're building out your budget, it's not a definite that you'd be securing all of the funding in that zip code. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. So the next page on the Form 2, it's the emergency housing assistance chart, just reflecting the various zip codes as well as the funding amount. So it's the same thing. You will check off the zip codes that you'll be providing services under for any of the regions or for all 4 regions. The next form we're going to move to is a technical narrative. Okay, so Vanessa had already pointed out the various points that's awarded to each section of the technical narrative. So under each section, you will have a box, a response box. So once you type into the box, it will expand. Even though it's not doing that on the screen here for you to see, but when you do it, when you download the form, as you type it, the box will expand to capture all the information. You're going to do that for each section. The only thing, because I don't need to read through this or tell you, many of you have done this before, is just reading the question and providing your answer. The only section I want to bring to your attention is the approach and equitable practices. Sarah had already gone over that about the new process that we have done, and we combined both the approach section from the previous RFP and equitable practices together. So now this section has the most points, which is 24 points. Okay, so this is all the technical narrative. The next form is the Form 3. As was pointed out earlier when Sarah and Vanessa spoke about the outcomes, you will be providing us with 2 outcome sheets, 2 Form 3 for your proposal. So using the outcome chart that is provided in the RFP, you will complete this document. You're going to tell us the service that is being provided in no more than 3 to 4 sentences. You're going to choose your standardized outcome from the outcomes that were provided in the RFP. And along with that, you're going to also use the associated outcome indicator that is provided with the outcome to complete Section D. Section C, you're going to tell us your measurement system, how you're going to be measuring the success of the outcome that you are providing services to the client. And E, here you're giving us your projections. You're going to be telling us the total number of individuals and households. You're projecting this out that you plan to serve for fiscal year 25 as well as fiscal year 26. In F, you're going to tell us the percentage, the number of clients and household that you're projecting to achieve the outcome, the standardized outcomes for both fiscal year 25 and fiscal year 26. And please check your math for errors. So I'm going to switch it back over to Vanessa, who will go through the cost narrative form along with the budget forms and the attachments.
Thank you, Michelle. And just to clarify, that was 4 outcome sheets that you would be submitting, not 2.
4, thank you.
All right, now to go over the proposal cost narrative form. Very similar to the technical form, you are going to be answering some questions here. So for number 1, you're just going to enter your questions into this text box here, and it will expand as Michelle was trying to demonstrate as you're typing in your response. So question number 1, there is some additional information there, just some resource information that you could use, but the question is provided up here above. Number 2 and 3, we will go over shortly, which is the completion of forms 4A, 4B. There is some notes here that we do want to highlight. The indirect cost rate used to calculate overhead costs for administering the program should not exceed the Fairfax County indirect cost rate of 14.12%, unless otherwise stated. And this is for everyone. If you do get awarded a CSBG funds and you do have a designated federal subrecipient, or you are a designated federal fund subrecipient, then your organization's federally approved indirect cost rate or the de minimis rate of 10% will be utilized, but this will be addressed during negotiations. So when submitting your proposal, it should be using the 14.12% or should not exceed the 14.12%. Then number 3, you have the estimated program financial match, or the leveraging form, as we like to call it, form 5. You will complete that form, and then there's some information here about that. And then number 4, there is a question that you will address again in this text box. So now to go over forms, the budget forms. This is form 4. And I've gone ahead and entered some information here. All applicants are required to use the budget forms to respond to the cost proposal portion of the RFP. All monetary figures related to the proposal should be stated only on the budget forms and not on the technical forms. We have seen previously that some organizations may include what they were funded in their summary on Form 2. Please do not do that, as we will have to redact that information. Keep all financial items in these budget forms. So Form 4 is the, excuse me, the program budget. We have these yellow boxes here that allow you to enter information. If you attempt to enter information in one of these not yellow boxes, then you will get an error saying that this is a protected sheet and you may not make any changes. Some of these cells do relate to other cells. And so, for instance, I entered here ABC Food Pantry, and my organization is Alphabet Kitchen. That does transfer over to our other forms automatically, so you don't have to re-enter that information. All right, personnel cost is linked to Form 4A, which we'll go through shortly. And then we have our direct costs here, which will be entered. This is at a program level, so do keep that in mind. For instance, your program budget for rent might be $5,000 and your request amount is $1,200, or you have an audit for $500 for the program's budget, and then the request is $200. All of this does add up to the bottom here where it says total direct costs and then the total budget requested. If you were funded in fiscal year 2024 through the CCFP, you will include that 2024 information here. If you're a program that was not funded in 2024, you will only complete the information in 2025 and 2026. Moving on to Form 4A, this is your program personnel budget. I've included here a little sample. For instance, I have Ann Smith, who's a program manager, and her program budget total is $5,000, and we're requesting $3,000 for fiscal year 25 and 26. A budget justification is required, and we do ask to identify the number of hours per week spent on this program. So for instance, I included here a little bit about what the program manager role does, and it's $25 per hour at 120 hours, which is how we came up to 3,000. Scrolling down here, you can include fringe benefits and payroll taxes. And again, we do ask you to provide detail on how fringe benefits and payroll taxes were calculated, and all of that will be added up here. This information does pull over to Form 4 to this top section, the total amounts. And then we have Form 4B, which is the program budget justification. These numbers come in from Form 4, and we're asking you here to include a budget justification where you're going to explain and justify each proposed budget line item that is being requested. So just an example, rent for food pantry and storage facility for $1,200, a partial fee for a single audit expense. These are just some examples here. All of this will add up. You would also include here your indirect expenditures, and that will automatically add it up for you. At the bottom of this worksheet, there is a box. If your program is currently being funded by a resource other than CCFP, you want to explain why CCFP funds are needed. If you were funded in the previous cycle and the amount requested represents a substantial increase over 5%, we ask you to include a justification of the requested increase of funds. And then we have Form 5, which is your estimated program revenue form. As you can see here, we're going to start off with cash resources. So this may be some resources that your program receives that are federal or state, county, foundations, or fundraising, client payments. I put an example here for United Way. We received $10,000 in FY25 and FY26. There is a drop-down box here that allows you to select whether, for instance, if this is a proposal, if you have pending submission, you're waiting for a response, if the fundraiser was already planned, and so forth. And then a budget justification box just included some information there. Scrolling down, we have non-cash resources. This can be donations or even space, maybe 15,000 refrigeration storage space donated by ABC Construction. Just some details there. And lastly, the volunteer section. We have two parts here. One is for professional volunteers and another for non-professional volunteers. Something to note, you're going to include the number of professional volunteers, the number of hours they're providing, the value of volunteers should be noted here. As you can see, I've included two examples. We have, for instance, an attorney here who is donating 20 hours of his time, and his rate is $250 per hour. So his value would be $5,000, where my accountant maybe does 30 hours at $100, and so it's $3,000. This amount would be the total of all of that. The non-professional volunteers works a little different. It's an automated hourly rate of $32.59 in accordance with the Virginia Employment Commission. So we're going to enter the number of volunteers and the number of hours they work, some details of what they provide, and that will automatically calculate for you. And that's it for Form 5. All right, and now we're going to move to questions and answers. So let's see here. And I believe that is, oh, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting one part. We're going to move on to attachments before we move on to question and answers. Some of the attachments that are included in Bonfire are attachment 1, which is the affirmation of legally required contract terms. Please do review this information and you will sign and include the signature and document. Attachment 2 is your Fairfax County Business Classification Schedule. There are some definitions here provided to help you identify which classification your organization is. And again, review all that. Attachment 3 is the certification of financial solvency for nonprofits. Pretty self-explanatory. And then you would have a board chair and executive director sign this document. Attachment 4 is the Virginia State Corporation Commission registration information. Please read thoroughly and select the appropriate box for your organization. Attachment 5 is certification regarding debarment or suspension. This form is just you're certifying that none of these are true for you. And then you sign at the bottom there. Attachment 6, certification regarding ethics in public contracting. And then attachment 7, this is an optional attachment. Again, if you have trade secrets or proprietary information that you want to protect, you would include the information to be protected, what section or page number, and why you think it needs to be protected, and this will be reviewed. And then attachment 8, subrecipient risk analysis and compliance record. This is only to be completed for those who are applying or saying yes to CSBG funding. Otherwise, you do not need to complete it. And then attachment 9 is a required attachment. This is new this fiscal year. It's the cyber insurance questionnaire. You will go through these questions, select yes or no where applicable. And then you will also identify, the worksheet will help you walk through it. You'll identify at the end if you are one of these or if needed. And this will be submitted, and we will discuss responses at the time of negotiation if you are funded. That's all the attachments, and now we will go into Q&A.
Vanessa, before we start the question and answers, I just want to apologize to the programs that were late in joining us due to the confusion with the various links. Apparently, many of you were using the link in the proposal and was not aware that an addenda was sent out with a new link for you to register for this conference. And some of you might have also received a link in an email from other staff members. So we just want to apologize for the confusion and stress that we will ensure that for the next cycle, we don't run into this issue again. But we strongly encourage everyone to go to Bonfire for all your information, regardless of what you might receive outside of Bonfire. Bonfire is the official portal for the RFPs. You will receive all addendas through Bonfire and all email communication. Thank you, and we will begin our question and answers.
Andrew, I think Andrew had his hand up. No, you good? Okay.
It was basically to apologize for the miscommunications that have occurred. Yes, this definitely will be something we do not repeat.
Okay.
Andrew, if I could, I would just add that we, for those of you that have missed it, we absolutely encourage you to watch the video. Any questions you have for the section in which you missed, we will take, and there's instructions on how to submit those. So please know that even if you're not able to, you haven't submitted them during this process, we will accept those questions and answer them. So we will be able to get anything that you missed and questions associated with that answered.
We will also endeavor to get the recording up as quickly as possible. Getting this done is no small feat. It's outside of our hands. We have to work with our DIT department, but we will ensure that we can get it up to you before October 13th. So Devin, you have received some questions. We received some questions ahead of the pre-proposal conference, which we have decided to wait to provide you with the answer. So I'm going to ask that Devin read those first set of questions first, and then he will start going through the questions that you posed in the chat room.
Okay, the first question asked is, in the last cycle of this award, the amount of funding was increased significantly. Will this cycle revert back to amounts that had previously been requested, or can we request the same amount as we had been provided in the last cycle?
Sure, I can take that. You should be developing your budgets according to the need that you've identified, as well as the funding in which we have noted is allocated per zip code. So it depends on the program that you're running. It depends on how you would structure it and the cost associated with it and the need that you're meeting. So I would say you need to start from scratch and be able to look at what our funding parameters are now and how we've listed them in more detail. And but there is significantly more funding than in previous years. And so please take a look at those zip codes and associated funding to create your budget.
All right, thank you, Sarah. The next question is also directed for NCS. It says, does the distribution of prepaid grocery cards meet the definition of emergency food assistance?
And yes, Ramona did specifically call that out, that you are able to use that as a mechanism to get emergency food out, emergency and urgent needs out, as a way to get that service out. But please just remember, it needs to be for that service. So your mechanism and tool you use to get the funding out is appropriate for it to be emergency food cards.
All right. Question 3 is, must an offer show labor cost if the organization has no paid staff?
I can.
I mean, I have an answer here. It says if the program is all volunteer operated with no paid staff, the program does not need to demonstrate labor cost in the personal budget form 4A. Volunteers are denoted in budget form 5.
Correct. It is important that they complete the budget forms, form 4. However, for personnel and personnel costs, those would be $0, but it is still important to complete those documents.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. All right, moving on. The next question 4, is is there any threshold or for organizational revenues? The answer to that is no. There is no threshold for organizational revenues. All right, on to question 5. It says we do not have a board of directors. Is this something that disqualifies us? The answer to that is no. In absence of a board of directors, applicants must submit a current list of the governing body for the organization. Question 6. Is the lack of current audit disqualifying? Can a lesser process, i.e. financial review, suffice instead of a full audit? The answer to that, it says that applicants who do not have an audit at the time of submission must provide written justification for the lack thereof. If funded, the organization will be required to submit an audit following the first year of operation. All right, on to the questions that were fielded in the chat. The first question, it says, I'm confused by the example of food bank, as the definition of food bank is provider to food providers and not directly to clients. Can you clarify how a food bank would be eligible?
Ramona, can you take that one?
Okay. For this example, for the proposal, I'm sorry, are we able to go back to the slides or no? To look at the slide, like for clarification, or is that not a thing? Okay.
It's still sharing.
Thank you. The one that just gives the examples between RFP 1 and 2. And we do have organizations like the Capital Area Food Bank, and maybe that's what you're thinking about, people who are thinking about a food bank compared to a food pantry. We use those as just examples of like a food bank to provide emergency food. This does not mean that you only have to be a food bank. Again, these are just illustrative examples of what would be under emergency food assistance. So I just wanted to just give you an opportunity to see that and to take that into context. So I hope that answers the question. And just for you all to see just the difference again between RFP 1 and RFP 2. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Devin. Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you, Ramona. Another question, this is question 8 that I fielded from the chat. It says, many Fairfax County nonprofits providing food assistance are partners with the Capital Area Food Bank, which is part of Feeding America. Feeding America defines a food bank as follows. A food bank is a nonprofit organization that collects and distributes food to hunger relief charities and community organizations like food pantries, soup kitchens, and shelters. Given this definition, how might a food bank comply with the standardized outcomes and indicators?
So
Go ahead, Ramona. I'm
Okay,
sorry I'm sorry if it's overlap. I was just, trying to
Oh,
keep up
no,
with the
no.
chat.
No, but I think that's good because I think we clearly are seeing that the language we need to be, this is maybe an area for improvement for us for the next one around the language. So again, I just want to acknowledge that we know that we have Capital Area Food Bank that supports other organizations. It is also in the process of meeting a critical and urgent need. So I think that's the thing to think about when you are writing your proposal is it meeting an urgent need? Is this food, short-term, long-term, just using those descriptions. But I also hear what you all are saying around the term food bank, and we will take that under advisement when we give service examples for the next cycle. And thank you.
I'm sorry, Ramona, but the question, it had another aspect to it. It said, since the food banks, hold on, let me see. It says, since the food banks provide food to pantries, soup kitchens, shelters, etc., they are not collecting the detailed household level information required for all programs and emergency food assistance programs. By definition, food banks are not serving the household directly, which means they cannot comply with the RFP requirement that programs must provide direct client food assistance. Section 6.1. So can you speak to that, please? I know you may have answered it already. Like I said, I'm trying to keep up with the chat, so I apologize.
Oh, no, I understand. And I'm going to ask Sarah, is there anything that I'm missing that we need to change at this time?
No, I think that's correct. Sometimes we have in the past utilized or swapped out the word food bank and food provider, and food pantry. So we apologize. We'll be more clear next time. I think that the opinions expressed in the chat are we appreciate and we will take note. But those of you that are a food bank specifically, please read very closely what we've put in there in terms of the definitions, and we will review those proposals accordingly. However, we do know that food banks do play a key part in being able to support food for those emergency food providers as well. So we will look at each individual proposal specifically and succinctly to make sure that we're able to, that they meet the definition and or not meet the definition. So, and then the last thing I'd say is I think every organization needs to see which lane they go in, or excuse me, which RFP they go in. And if food banks are feeling like it's really more appropriate for them to be in RFP 1, that is okay. And or if they feel like some of their programs are based in RFP 2, we will take those and review them as well. So I think that we appreciate the input, but I think that covers it.
All right, thank you, Sarah. All right, on to question 9. The question is, the RFP states that programs are required to disperse 60% of allocated funding directly to program participants. Does this mean 60% of requested CCFP funding must be allocated to the direct assistance, or 60% of the total program funding, including sources other than CCFP?
Great question. I think I'd like to write the answer to that and submit it. I think that's probably a little bit easier. We should confer on that. However, we will write the answer to that. But the intention of the funding and the amount of funding going out, especially for this RFP, was to ensure that dollars are out on the streets to be able to support residents. But we recognize that there needs to be associated case management and administrative support for those funds. So that's the intention of this funding, but we recognize that obviously supports are needed, and particularly CCFP does support the administrative cost of all of those things that you all do with emergency food and emergency housing. We will write up this specific answer for you in the follow-up.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Sarah. On to question 10. It says, to clarify, there are 6 outcomes for each, and we must pick 4. but in each category as designated, that's a question. It says, sorry, there are only 4 for each, so we must select all listed. Is that what you mean?
That is correct.
All right. All right, on to question 11. One of the emergency housing outcomes in RFP2 is specifically tied to eviction. Percent of households who were less likely to be evicted due to support from the program. Would emergency shelter for victims of domestic violence be more appropriate for RFP2 or RFP1? Eviction is not always the issue leading to homelessness for victims.
That is a great question. I'd like to write the answer to that as well.
And I do want to make a statement that the answers provided are not the official answers. The official answers will be provided via an addenda, which will be posted on Bonfire. Thank you. Devin?
Thank you, Vanessa. All right, on to question 12. Question 12, it says Form 2. Question 6, is the CSBG federal funding potential additional funds?
It is not additional funding, it is part of the funding pool. Approximately 10% of the funding allocated for this RFP is CSBG dollars.
All right, thank you, Andrew. On to question 13. It says for question A/1 with the technical narrative where it reads, describe the program and services that the proposal will address. Should it actually read, describe the problem that the proposal will address? If so, the same edit needs to be made to the other RFP ending in 3850.
We can look into that and answer in writing.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, on to question 14. Again, it's a form issue. It says for Form 2, number 7, what if your program was funded in the past, but not under the current CCFP cycle? Would it be considered a new program?
No, we've had this question in the past, and we really need to rethink how we state it. When we say new program, we mean that you have never ever received funding from the Consolidated Community Funding Pool. So to answer that question, you can check the currently funded CCFP box because it's not a new program per se that have received any funding from the funding pool, and we will revise that question.
Thank you, Michelle. All right, on to question 15. I'm not sure where we were at in the presentation, but it just says, shouldn't it be 4 outcome sheets?
Yes, there is a required 4 outcome sheets. 2 of the required for all programs and 2 for emergency food or emergency housing.
Thank you, Vanessa. All right, next question 16 is, could you please repeat what you said about redacting and keeping budget info in budget forms?
Yes, what was mentioned is that to please keep all financial information in your budget forms or your budget narrative, to not to be included in the technical forms, or for instance, if you were previously funded, what we see a lot is on the summary form 2, people tend to put in what they were previously funded for and how much. We have to redact that information, and so it's best to keep all of that as part of your cost proposal.
Thank you, Vanessa. All right, question 17. It says, can you repeat what what we may not include regarding budget in the narrative so that you won't need to redact?
Right, so same answer. It's
Okay.
not the budget narrative, it's the technical narrative. Do not include numbers in the technical narrative from previously funded amounts.
Thank you, Vanessa. Next question is question 18. Well, it's not a question. It's just the an issue with the access. It says I want to register my disappointment. Then about everyone registering with facets. But Michelle already explained, with the link and the addendum and everything, and we've apologized for that. But I want to register my disappointment. The entire facets team properly pre-registered a week ago. Apparently, the meeting link was subsequently changed, and after waiting 20 minutes, we were told to check into Bonfire. So that was one of the issues in the chat that Michelle had addressed previously. Question 19, it says, can you please explain the requirement to register in EVA?
There isn't. Do you want to take it, Andrew? Because there's not a requirement to register.
We'll follow up in writing on that one.
Okay. Next question, Devin.
I got you. All right. Question 20. Are electronic signatures permitted?
We'll follow up in writing on that one.
All right. Question 21. Are you saying that we have to request our funding by zip code?
Sure, I'll take that one. Yes, the best that you can. So we've always wanted you to identify which region that you're working within. And I know many of you are working with many areas of the county. What we're trying to do, though, is for you to identify where you're working and then giving you some kind of guardrails around how much money is available for that. So, for example, if you work in 20190, you would check that, but you may not be looking to work there in the entire $27,000. $27,000 that's available. Perhaps your budget is only needing 10 of that. But if you are only working in that area, or you're thinking that you need to work in that area at a $50,000 rate, that's not our amount, that's not probably realistic for us to be able to support. So we've always wanted you to identify where you're working the best that you can. And for those of you that serve the entire county, we recognize that may be challenging, but we do want you to use this as a guide and then explain any anomaly that you might have that may make it difficult for you to be able to do that. If you serve the entire county and you're indicating that you do, you can check all of these, but you do not have to use, of course, all of the money indicated, because we probably won't be supporting that route of course, all of the funding available, but a portion of that funding would be going to that area, the best that you can articulate in your proposal.
Thank you, Sarah. Question 22. If we are currently using FAP funding to get food to the community, could we apply for these funds to replace those funds as that program winds down?
Sure. So FAP, for those of you that don't participate, is our food access program, which was funded through ARPA funding. And you are, if you have received FAP funding, you are eligible to apply for CCFP for sure. I would like you to identify, though, your program. If it's similar, that's fine, but it's not necessarily to replace it. It's that you have an ongoing need, and that ongoing need, there is an ongoing need, and your program would like to meet that ongoing need, not a one-for-one replacement necessarily. But you are eligible to apply for both. Or excuse me, you receive both, you're eligible to apply for this.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, question 23. Does the required audit need to be done by a CPA? We have a volunteer who is a former CPA. Could that person do the audit?
We'll respond in writing, but what we're requesting is an independent audit, and we'll cite the section of the RFP resource manual that provides additional information on that.
Thank you, Andrew. Question 24 regarding case management says, how do you define case management?
We will put that in writing as well. Very good question, and we'll get a definition for you in the written response.
Question 25. It says no board. Don't all 501c3 organizations have a requirement to have a board?
We will follow up in writing on that one, but the state as well as the IRS do have requirements tied to board membership and the number of board members. So we will follow up in writing on that question.
All right. Question 26, CAFB. Let me see. I'm gonna have to scroll straight to the question. Give me 1 second.
I believe that's a comment about a specific organization. I would avoid responding on comments about other organizations.
Okay. All right. Question 27. Is there an increased possibility of being awarded funding if you are willing to accept CSBG funds?
It is not additional funding. It is part of the funds that are allocated to the funding pool.
Question 28. Do you have an estimate of when the written answers will be available? Unfortunately, we are not able to begin applications until some of these answers are provided.
We will try to get those out to you within 10 business days or less.
All right, thank you, Michelle. Question 29. Should we not even say in our technical narrative that we are currently funded by CCFP or were previously?
Yes, you can say that you are currently or previously funded. What we're asking is that you do not state dollar amounts in your technical narrative. Don't say that we have received $5 million in the past, or we're asking for $5 million, because we will have to redact that dollar amount from the technical narrative. But you can identify that you were previously funded or is currently funded by the CCFP.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. Question 30 is, can you ask for more money than what is listed in a particular zip code? In some zip codes in our area, there appears to be very little funding.
You can, and but it's probably pretty unlikely that we will be able to fund it beyond what we've estimated there. But you can put it in there, and we will be yes, you can put it in there. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Sarah. And that was the last question that I have listed in the chat.
Sarah, do you want to wind up?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all very much for your questions. And we will put all of them in writing And as Vanessa noted that, our final and vetted and complete answers will absolutely be those that are in writing. So we did the best we could to answer here in, off the cuff, but we want to be able to make sure that they're all answered and vetted and so forth. And so that will be those in writing that we're going to get back to you. We will attempt to get back to you as quickly as we can, but as Michelle noted, it will be within 10 days. We will have the recording also put up online for people to be able to view that. And we apologize profusely that there was any miscommunication and misunderstanding on our part for where people should go to attend this. So thank you all for bringing that to our attention, and we will absolutely rectify it. And thank you all for your interest in these great questions. We will make sure that we get back to you, and thank you for all the work that you do. And hopefully we can support the work that you're asking to be able to be funded. And any other further questions, the way that people can ask further questions is by emailing them, correct, Michelle and Vanessa? Yep.
Yes,
Okay.
the dpmmccfp@fairfaxcounty.gov. It's stated in the RFP and it's on your cover sheet. Please send your questions to that email address.
And this PowerPoint will also be posted online as well. So thank you all very much, and look forward to talking to you all soon. Okay. Thank you very much. Have a good day.